Okay, so the Call of Duty Black Ops 6 zombie storyline just came to a close with the final map of the game, Reckoning. And honestly, I'm really satisfied with the ending. Dare I say, I think it's beautiful. First of all, let me clarify that I'm not really Black Ops 6's biggest fan. I don't like the modernized zombies formula with armor, loadouts, weapon rarities and so on, but I am more than willing to put all of that aside when a map handles its ending and story this well. I mean, there are single lines of dialogue that foreshadow the future by referencing the past in ways that honestly kind of made me emotional. I wasn't sat there crying my eyes out or anything like that, but I did feel something more than just shock at a reveal or fan service moment while playing a zombies map for the first time in a while. This map certainly has its fan service reveals though, and we will get there, but it actually really respects the original storyline and doesn't undo the actions of our past characters. Before we talk about the ending, we have to touch on what precedes it. The Reckoning Easter egg itself is actually Black Ops 6's strongest in my opinion. It's complicated but logical and most importantly quite fun. That's not to say that it doesn't have its flaws, it's not a top tier Easter egg, but it does feel like it's scratching at the door of the kind of Easter eggs we would get in classic Aether storyline maps. But anyway, it's not really the gameplay I'm here to discuss at the end of the day. Whether you like or dislike Black Ops 6, no matter if you agree or disagree with the modernization of the zombies formula, and regardless of if you're bothered or not by the addition of over-the-top collaboration characters, there is only one element of Call of Duty that I have ever truly cared about, and that is the zombies storyline. And while I don't think Black Ops 6's zombies storyline as a whole does many of the things that made me fall in love with the earlier games to begin with, the Reckoning map kind of does. Before we touch on why I think the ending works so well, a brief summary of the relevant points in the Black Ops 6 zombie story to understand the ending is that Requiem are broken out of the Terminus Island facility by an AI recreation of Samantha Maxis, who sacrificed herself at the end of the Cold War storyline by trapping herself in the Dark Aether to defeat the Forsaken. We're led to believe that the SAM AI has a plan to save the original Maxis from the Dark Aether and needs Requiem's help to pull it off. Also fueled by a hatred of Richtofen, the crew agree and head to Citadel Day More to retrieve an amulet that they'll need to get access to a portion of the Dark Aether from which they can get the Sentinel artifact. So essentially, Citadel Day More and the Tomb Zombies maps are just fetch quests. That is a simplification of what those maps are. Citadel is actually quite a strong map, and the Tomb is comparatively weaker, but still has some interesting elements to it. The point being, neither of those maps actually push the zombie storyline forward in any meaningful way. Then, after those two maps, we head to the mansion in Shattered Vale, where we actually come face to face with the SAM AI for the very first time. Throughout the Shattered Vale Easter egg, we leverage liminal spaces to charge the Sentinel artifact with Prima Materia before giving it over to the SAM AI so she can bring Maxis back. But then, she betrays us, sending us into a pocket of liminal space so she can do with the Sentinel artifact as she pleases. Also in this liminal space is Edward Richtofen, the director of Requiem who imprisoned the strike team on the Terminus Island to begin with. Of course, Weaver goes to enact his revenge, that was always part of his plan to begin with, but then Richtofen reveals that everything he has done has been to bring back his family, a family that Weaver and Maxis killed in a failed attempt to take out Edward Richtofen himself. Now, having just been betrayed by Sam and feeling somewhat sympathetic towards Richtofen, Weaver and the crew decide to work together with their old director to stop Maxis's plan, which Richtofen tells them is to create a physical manifestation of Samantha Maxis for the AI to inhabit, not actually bring back the version of Maxis that flew into the Dark Aether all those years ago and was a dear friend of the Requiem team. And that's when Reckoning begins, immediately after Shattered Vale. Throughout the entire map, we hear both Richtofen and the SAM AI trying to get the strike team to side with them and defeat the other. Of course, given their complicated past with Richtofen and more recent betrayal from Sam, there isn't a clear-cut right side for the team to take. Weaver, for example, hates Richtofen but does feel guilty about having murdered his family, seeing helping him revive them as a potential redemption for himself. Equally, other members of the team, like Strauss are much more sympathetic towards the Sam AI, reasoning that if she has all of Samantha's memories, which the AI Sam does, in a way, allowing her to have a physical form would be indicative of saving Sam. And you can hear these characters grapple with the inevitable decision they're going to have to make all throughout this Easter egg. I love the way that the Sam AI tries to appeal to Ravenov specifically, who we know had a very close relationship with Samantha. The AI tells him how special Sam thought he was, and I also love that almost everything Sam says, Richtofen has a counter-argument to. He's always chiming in to essentially tell the strike team, do not believe her, and at times, Sam does the same. It all goes a really long way to hammer home the weight of the events that we're actually working towards in this map, and of course, that all culminates in the player having to make that decision right at the very end of the Easter egg. It is entirely up to you to decide if you want to side with Richtofen or the AI, which really made me nostalgic in a way much more complex than Treyarch just throwing in something from a past game to remind us of the past. Ingrained in the actual Easter egg itself, we are choosing between siding with Richtofen and a manifestation of Samantha Maxis. Siding with Richtofen and Maxis has been such an integral part of the zombie storyline at points in its history. Pretty much the entirety of Black Ops 2 revolved around whose side the Victis crew would take. And here we are, nearly a decade and a half later, with a map that's just released with the same DNA in its Easter egg. I adore that. The actual essence of this map isn't a carbon copy of what we've seen in the past, but it rhymes in a way. That's not where the echoes of the past end. You see, both the Sam AI and Richtofen are fighting over control over the Sentinel artifact, which would give them control over the Dark Aether. Sam wants to harness that power to manifest in a physical form, which frightens Richtofen because of the power she'd have, and Richtofen wants to use that same power to bring back his family. So, I guess, in a way, you could see the story like this. Sam and Eddie were both corrupted by the Dark Aether, one by her own ambition, and the other desperately trying to save his family. I could explain why this is such a beautiful dynamic for these two characters to have, but instead, I'll share with you a conversation between two friends by a campfire.
Monty and Shadowman were more similar than you know, Richtofen. Both were corrupted by the Dark Aether. One by his own ambition, the other desperately trying to save his friend.
Of course, the dynamic between Dr. Monty and the Shadow Man is vastly different to what's going on between Sam and Richtofen here, but the way they can be compared is deeply satisfying to me, especially as somebody who's been so invested in the zombie storyline since the very early days. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does often rhyme, although there is potentially an instance of history repeating itself in this map, and it really does manifest in such a beautiful way. But before I can explain that, it's important to know how the story plays out. The first possible ending sees the crew siding with the Sam AI and killing Richtofen. After that, the AI uses the Sentinel artifact to manifest a body for her to inhabit, becoming a physical version of Samantha Maxis. I really don't think this is the Samantha from the Forsaken Easter egg ending, as I've seen some people suggest, because if she had been trapped in the Dark Aether for as long as she would have been for the storyline's timeline to make sense, she would have aged so much more as time works differently in the Dark Aether. We saw this when she spent a significantly shorter amount of time in the Dark Aether during Black Ops Cold War, and specifically Firebase Z. So this version of Samantha that we see at the end of the Reckoning Easter egg is just a version created by the AI. The likely reason she's wearing the same clothes as she was in Forsaken is because she's been constructed using the most recent memories of her. I could be wrong, but that's just my takeaway. Of course, we do see a glint in her eyes as well, showing us the new version of Sam has her powers just as Richtofen suggested and feared. Of course, the other ending has us siding with Richtofen, destroying the Sam AI and letting us use the Sentinel artifact to revive Richtofen's family, allowing them to live happily ever after. Which ending is the true canon ending is still currently unknown, but I don't think there is one. It's quite clear that siding with Richtofen leads to the better ending from the perspective of our characters, but I really don't believe there is a definitive ending that Treyarch see as canon. And that's all because of what happens next. The Requiem strike team are sucked in by the Sentinel artifact and sent to what we can only assume to be the Dark Aether. And I believe that either letting Richtofen live with his family or letting Sam have a physical form is the last thing we're ever going to see in that universe outside of the Dark Aether. And that's why it isn't really important which ending is canon. So why do I feel so sure that we are done with that universe? Well, that finally brings us on to that example of history repeating itself, which also involves that single line of dialogue that nearly made me tear up that I mentioned right at the start of this video. See, in the Reckoning map, there is a side Easter egg that involves you running through metal detectors in a specific pattern, and once you do that, a musical side Easter egg is triggered.
What is that music? Where have I heard it before?
That music is a track called Samantha's Piece. It's a piece of music that is synonymous with the ending of the universe in the Zombies storyline, because it's also synonymous with the beginning of the Dark Aether storyline. It's the piece of music that bridges the gap between one storyline and another. For those of you who don't know, this is the piece of music that plays when the paradox is resolved in Tag Der Toten. Once the multiverse is destroyed, the characters achieve their Pyrrhic victory. Once everything from the corrupted universe is banished into the Dark Aether, and the two innocent souls of Sam and Eddie are sent into the new universe, and we hear the two versions of our iconic characters telling us what they want most in the world, this is the piece of music that plays. And I think it's indescribably beautiful that it plays again on this map where we're saying goodbye to this universe as well. I can't even put into words how much I love that Richtofen remarks that he's actually heard this piece of music before, as even though I think it's a bit weird if we take this to mean that that music was literally playing when they walked into the new universe in Tag Der Toten, it does show us that he remembers the original universe, even if it's just in the slightest moments. I adore it. I think it would be way too far for me to draw the connection between this piece of music playing while the original crew were telling us what they wanted most, and in this map, when it plays again, it's a map where we're helping a version of Sam and Eddie get what they want most in the world. But I also wanted to mention it because it was something I thought of. Either way, it's the fact that this piece of music is present on the map that makes me believe we are saying goodbye to this universe, and hearing that line of dialogue from Richtofen did hit me in the feels. But anyway, if we are leaving this universe behind, what comes next? Once the strike team are in the Dark Aether, well, at this point, I'm sure you've seen what happens next.
Welcome to the party.
Yes, we get a brand new version of the original Zombies crew. This is not the Primus or Ultimus versions of the crew, neither is this the Great War version or any other version that we've had referenced in the past, at least as far as we're concerned. So what on earth has happened? We know all of the versions of these characters that we have ever played as died at the end of Tag Der Toten, and alongside that, the paradox was resolved, the multiverse was destroyed, and the universe was reset, right? Yes, that is all still correct, and the inclusion of this crew here at the very end of the Black Ops 6 story doesn't have to undo that in the slightest. You see, the characters we see here are clearly a version of our crew that we've never seen before, so we have no idea what they've been through and why they're here, but we already knew that versions of these characters existed in the Dark Aether. Samantha brings back some of their gear when she returns in Firebase Z, and that's actually something we're reminded of throughout the Reckoning's Easter egg, so it's clearly something Treyarch wanted to make us keenly aware of. I don't want to touch on this new version of our crew too much, as we know next to nothing, and it's all clearly something that's going to be a big part of Black Ops 7. I do, however, think it's interesting to mention that the manifestation of the Dark Aether that we see above the Sentinel artifact is clearly supposed to be indicative of the multiverse, and how that was represented on top of the Agarthan device back in Tag Der Toten. This isn't to say that the multiverse is back per se, even if it could be back in some form within the Dark Aether. I just think it's such a blatant callback that it's definitely worth acknowledging. Either way, it's all down to Treyarch and how they handle the Black Ops 7 story to make it work in a way that respects what came before the Dark Aether storyline. But the simple inclusion of a version of the original crew isn't cause for concern in my eyes. I think there's so much fertile ground for them to play with narratively. For example, the summoning key was destroyed and the multiverse with it in the Black Ops 4 storyline, which is exactly what the Chronorium told Nikolai needed to be done to end the cycle. But as the Sentinel artifact, which is present in the Dark Aether story, comes from a completely separate universe from the Aether storyline, it obviously wouldn't have been accounted for by Nikolai, Dr. Monty, Richtofen, or the Chronorium. As far as they're concerned, it didn't ever and would never exist, and because of that, it might have its own unique properties that can interact with the Dark Aether and everything that was banished within it in a way that allows for certain elements to come back without undoing what our characters did. For example, we've already seen zombies come back out of the Dark Aether, which was never supposed to happen in this new universe. But anyway, I'm entering into a territory of speculative theory crafting, which I will save for another day. For now, I want to bring the conversation back to the final map of Black Ops 6. What I think is so special about Reckoning is that at face value, it's just an ending for the storyline of Black Ops 6 that only really got started in Shattered Vale, the map before. The Easter egg is pretty fun, but that's it. However, if you take a closer look, and I mean really look, allow yourself to read into the things that haven't been said. Ask yourself, what does this piece of music mean? Or what is the actual context of this artifact being here? And of course, consider who these characters are, who they represent by name, and of course, who they represent thematically. If you truly choose to lose yourself in the story Reckoning is telling, you can. For the first time in over half a decade, we have a map that echoes what made the Zombies storyline so great, no, so beautiful in the first place. To prove to you just how much history rhymes as we end this discussion, my closing thoughts mirror the exact same words said by Radostin27, one of the Zombies community's greatest narrative interpreters over the years, when discussing the ending of Tag Der Toten and the original Aether storyline. Reckoning is incredibly symbolic and closes a chapter of Zombies in a way that is narratively beautiful, but not necessarily satisfying. There are many other ways they could have ended this, but I am happy with what we got. Before Call of Duty Black Ops 6 came out, I had the intention of covering the Zombies season as it unfolded. There were elements of the first two maps that really interested me, but I didn't see them explored in a way that I found satisfying, and so honestly, as much as I paid attention to what was going on, I had no motivation to actually cover it here on the channel at all. But the ending of the Reckoning Easter egg has completely reinvigorated my passion and interest in the current Call of Duty Zombies storyline, and as and when we learn more about Black Ops 7, I will be here to discuss it. If you have enjoyed this video, all I ask is that you consider subscribing, and for those of you who are channel members, today we've added a brand new emote that celebrates Call of Duty Zombies. I've actually been hard at work on another Call of Duty Zombies video for a little while now, which I'm going to have to rework ever so slightly, as some of the things that I've said were missing in Modern Zombies are very present in Reckoning. If you're interested in some more Zombies content, then look no further than the two videos on your screen right now. On the left, you can watch me play Black Ops 3 Custom Zombies for the very first time, and on the right is my initial reaction to the Terminus Easter egg ending back at launch, where I made some guesses as to where the story would go from there, so that one might be fun to look back on now as well, and see how wrong or right I was. Either way, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.